Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we are back in Planet Zoo for another video in our Tacoma Zoo project. Today we're doing a cougar or mountain lion habitat, however you want to call it, and it's going to be really cool and realistic and just awesome. So stay tuned here. We're going to jump into the time-lapse portion right now. Alright, for today in this episode, we're going to be continuing our Northern Trail area in our new zoo build, Tacoma Zoo. This is episode 4 of the series. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, you can check them out in the description down below. There will be a link to the playlist where you can watch episodes 1 through 3 if you haven't seen them. I recommend checking them out if you haven't. We do some really cool stuff and you get to see how the zoo got to where it is in this episode. But for this episode specifically, we are going to be doing a cougar or mountain lion, whatever you want to call it. The game calls it a cougar, so I'm probably going to continue calling it a cougar habitat today. We do something cool with this one. I sort of go for more realistic aspects. You can see it already on the screen now as we're sort of increasing the size of those like wire mesh fences on the side. Sort of a little realistic nod, and I'll talk about that more in the real-time portion. But before we get into all of this build and all of this time-lapse and things like that, if you haven't subscribed down below, please consider doing so. It's completely free and it really does help out the channel, and the majority of you are not subscribed, so please consider doing so. It would mean a lot. So after last episode where we did the moose, and I really like how the moose habitat turned out. It's very natural, very cool, and things like that. But I wanted to do something a little more zoo-y, a little more realistic in terms of like a practical zoo setting. It doesn't make sense to have that moose habitat how it was in a zoo setting, but this one definitely screams like zoo. I looked up a lot of different cougar and mountain lion habitats out there, took a lot of inspiration from those, specifically the one at the San Diego Zoo. They have a really cool mountain lion habitat there, or I said mountain lion again, cougar if you want to call it that. That's what they call it in the game. We should probably say it that way. So they got a really cool cougar habitat, and really to protect the guests and people that are watching the animal, you know, at the zoo, as you do, they need to put mesh and fence around the whole thing, so even above, right where you're looking at, along the sides and the back. And this is really just for the protection of the guests. Mountain lions, or I'm saying it again, but cougars are very smart. They can climb, and they're pretty damn dangerous for people. So, you know, you gotta make sure that all the guests are safe while still, you know, looking at the animal. So I sort of went for a hybrid here. I put the nice tall fences on the side, but in order to make it look nice, I sort of left the viewing area that the guests have a little more open so you can see it a little better. So it's not completely realistic, but it's a little nod to the realism here. We are playing in sandbox, so I have turned on the animals can escape, among other things. So that's sort of why I went with that decision. Didn't go for the crazy realism, but I wanted to do a nod to that and sort of take that in consideration, because I really do like doing realism in these builds, but at the same time I like making stuff that looks really nice too. So sometimes I'll go for the nice over the realism. It's just how it is. So a lot of this build was just really making this height variance in the habitat, this sort of rockwork cave area in the back, and then from there on out just filling it with vegetation. I'm only really putting in one cougar in this habitat just for realistic purposes, and we do choose a female cougar, so they're a little smaller than the male cougar, so they have more than enough space in this big habitat. But it is what I wanted to do. It looks nice. I'm happy with the result, and it's just a lot of small touches here and there. Now, you're not going to see all of the work I did on it in the time lapse. I generally do not do that for all my videos, just because it would be really long and really boring to watch me do time lapse for about 15 minutes and then walk around the habitat. So I try to trim it up a bit. So you're going to see sort of a large transformation with the amount of vegetation, some of the rock placement, things like that, when we jump in the real-time portion here in a second. That's because I did a lot of that work off camera. I did a bit of it here just to show you all the gist of how it's done, and how you can potentially replicate it in your zoos yourself. And for this build, it's really about taking your time, and it's like that with any build. Just adding a lot of the small details go a long way, and just adding, you know, different enrichment items, putting sort of foliage around them, trees in certain spots. And it doesn't have to always be super wide open, especially for an animal like this that likes to hide. It's good to put big trees around, obstructions, so the guests can't always be viewing the animals. things like that go a long way in making these builds. At least that's what I've found, and that's sort of what I practice when I do these builds, so just a little tip in that sense. But with that being said, that's pretty much all the time lapse I have for this episode. Let's now jump into the real-time first-person walkthrough of the final build. Okay everyone, we are now in the real-time first-person walkthrough portion of the episode, and we're going to look at this mountain lion or cougar habitat that we made today. We're going to start up here at the butterfly house just to get a general idea of where we're at. The moose habitat we made in the last episode is right over that way, and we're going to head this way. We have a little staff area off to the side here. I have a few staff buildings, and over here it's not quite done yet, very work in progress. We're going to add some things here. I'm not quite sure which direction we're going to go with a lot of that, but over here we are at the cougar habitat here. Now I went for those tall mesh walls because that is just a realistic aspect of a lot of mountain lion and cougar habitats that I've sort of researched when making this, so I went for that. And then we sort of have this separation in the front here. Normally this would be completely caged if it was realistic, because cougars and mountain lions are very smart and can climb, so they usually are in completely like enclosed mesh or fence areas. I didn't really want to do that here because just aesthetically it looks a little better this way, and I just kind of went for the look here. We're in sandbox, so they can't really escape in this even if they wanted to. I have that turned off, so that's sort of why I went with that there, because the cougar is a pretty dangerous animal if it did get loose. It's playing around up there. It's a cute animation of it hopping back there as well. But yeah, I really love the habitat, to talk about that as well. We went with a little bit of a height variance here. We have sort of a mountain or a hillside here, a little cave for the cougar to hang out in, and various areas. And I only went with one cougar for realistic reasons, you know. They're very solitary animals. They don't really have partners unless they're mating, and since we're in a sandbox, I don't really have babies in this, so that's why I went with that for this one. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it looks super awesome, and it definitely is super cool here as well, and I'm happy with it. So let's jump out of first person, because you can only see so much in first person here, because I wanted to do it realistic and make sure that it was all safe and everything for the guests as well in that sense. So now that we are hopped out in the overhead camera here, you can get a better look at the habitat and how big it is. It's fairly large for the cougar. The cougar doesn't need this much space, but I just kind of got carried away when I was making it, and I'm happy with the looks. Even if it's a little big for just one cougar. But hey, you know, sometimes you just gotta make big habitats. We have the moose habitat from last episode over here on the other side. So this is gonna be generally the North American area, as I've talked, sort of the Northern Trail area. We have the beavers here, the moose here, and we're sort of going along this way. The cougars are gonna be here, and then this area is where I'm gonna do the remainder of the northern animals probably, and then other ways we have a little bit of a habitat I was working on here, but we're gonna do other themed areas for different parts of the world, different types of animals. But I really love how it turned out. We used the fake faux rocks here to make sort of this, like, it looks fake sort of cave, because I wanted to go for the feel that it is fake, because in a zoo it would be like sort of a man-made cave structure for them to hang out. And we have the cave in here where the staff can enter and the cougar can enter. We have the little water thing because I didn't put in any natural water in here, so they had nothing to drink. And other than that, just a lot of rocks. These are the natural tiger rocks. Lots of trees, so it's kind of like a mountainside. Lots of different varying areas with some rocks and some terrain paint. This little bush here, I use that throughout this habitat. Just makes it look really nice and natural. I'm really happy with how it turned out. And just having one little cougar, it's a female, so I think it's a little smaller than the males. It does have a ton of space to walk around with, so from a conservation standpoint, I think it's an A+ for the cougar. But all in all, really happy. We have lots of enrichment items, lots of everything. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's realistic with the sort of fence along the side here, nice and tall so the cougar can't climb as well. And then just a little simple viewing area, since it's not really one of those super big ticket animals in the zoo, so it's not the most grand habitat with like a ton of viewing angles and everything. But I think it's realistic. It's definitely safe for the guests if we want to go and think about that. And it's aesthetically pleasing. I really like how it looks and happy with the results. So I hope you guys did enjoy it too. Well, that's about all I have for this episode. Sort of a smaller build today, but I think it turned out fantastic. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and for those who stuck around to this point in the video, I especially appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed down below, please consider doing so. It helps out the channel a ton. Like the video if you really enjoyed it. Leave a comment if you have something to say about the zoo or something you want to see in the future, or just say hi. I do enjoy either way. But thank you all for sticking around. I'll have more Planet Zoo content coming real soon in the future, and hope to see you all in the next one.